If you go back to the root of the words of wild, it means self-willed. If you think of wild as being self-willed and uncontrolled by humans, then what's happening with a lot of the way humans interact with the natural landscape is taking away that self-willed nature of the natural world.
I think there's a very real danger that if we live in cities, and particularly if we're immersed in the virtual realities of the computer world, we lose touch with real reality. We lose touch with what gives life.
Most scientists agree that we're now in the midst of an environmental crisis which threatens to engulf the whole future of human civilization. But what exactly is this environmental crisis? I suppose to most people, they think of global warming, of extreme climate change, and of the fact that we've been using fossil fuels and now we have to find alternative energy sources. But what this does is this ignores a much wider problem. For instance, species extinction, loss of biodiversity, the retreat of glaciers, the melting of the polar ice caps, the desertification of much of the agricultural land, the acidification of the oceans. All this points to a much bigger crisis with our relationship with nature and about how we come to a situation where we can get what we need from nature without soiling our own nest and endangering the whole future of human society.
Well, it's this unrelenting idea of progress, that human progress has to go in a certain way. It has to go through the expansion of technology and industrial development, and there is no other way to do it.
It seems that human beings are part of that process now, that their only purpose is to continually expand and continually work and continually produce and continually consume.
I think one of the main ideas is that humans feel that we're very much in control of the world, and we should be in control of the world, and by making more technologies we can answer all our problems.
People start healing from their historic wounds, partly when they start dealing with the historic wounds of nature as well.
You know, we've got a lot more privatization, and the right-wing sort of narrative is very, very strong in the UK as a whole, and it makes us forget just how strange it is for people to have so little power over their own lives, over their environment, over their lands that they need.
Many of our environmental problems are related to the fact that we're disconnected from the environment, disconnected from the planet, and people feel powerless as to what they can do. Whereas if they own the land, they can develop policies that allow them to live more lightly on the land.
This is a book called The Closing Circle, which was written by a guy called Barry Commoner back in the late 60s. What's particularly interesting about it is, like, unlike his peers, when he dealt with the subjects of ecology and environmentalism, what he tried to do was he tried to tie it in with the lives of people, and particularly the lives of poor people and how it affected them. So what Barry Commoner identified differently from the rest of his peers was the fact that the environmental crisis was not just one thing. For instance, it wasn't the population problem, as Garrett Harding identified. It wasn't the fact that we were polluting our rivers or global warming, but rather Barry Commoner saw it as a contribution of different things, all pushing upon this natural system. And the way in which human beings were beginning to produce things, the plastics that they were introducing, the fact that we were using oil more, pesticides, the way in which mankind's technological processes were beginning to push upon the natural barriers, suggested to Barry Comra that there was a systemic problem which had to be tackled rather than just one solution to one problem.
There are so many ways that people can exist within the natural world that is of benefit to all the organisms that live there. And I see humans as a positive part of the natural landscape, depending on how we live. It's this expansionist, monoculture, profit-driven system that leads to a very kind of reduced natural environment, a loss of the wealth of the natural world. And what we're missing there is the diversity of life.
A healthy ecosystem evolves naturally, with each species finding its place in the grand scheme of things. And then there's us. Thousands of years ago, before human beings had even settled in Britain, it was just like one big forest. There was trees everywhere, and they used to say that a monkey could swing from Land's End to John O'Groats without his arse touching the ground. Now, of course, human beings are everywhere. Concrete has replaced soil and grass. Lampposts and pylons have replaced trees and forests. No invention has shaped our environment as much as a motor car. If ever there was a totem for consumer capitalism, then it would be the motor car. From the oil, steel, gas and rubber industries to the building of motorways, retail parks and out-of-town housing developments, to the effect it has on the air we breathe, which is now loaded with chemicals such as PM10, PM2.5 and nitrogen dioxide. Advertisers frequently use it to represent freedom, and yet there is no greater manifestation of our alienation from nature and each other.
Glasgow's the only city in the UK that's major motorway runs right through the heart of the city centre. We just didn't want a big motorway ploughed right through our community. That was an area that we'd all grew up in.
This is George McNeilage for Pollock. George has spent most of his life trying to make his community a better place to live.
I always think, thank goodness, my mother got a move to Pollock when they were clearing out Anderson for the construction of the M8 and the expressway and stuff. Another motorway, aye. Yeah, right through a working class area. That's the irony from my point of view. We were one of the last to get moved out of Anderson for all that work. When issues arose, then we were up for it. If they affected our community, we were up for it. And we saw that the M77 was affecting it.
George has fought alongside his community in many of the battles that they've faced over the years. The most dramatic of which was when the people of Pollock defended this ancient woodland from being uprooted to make way for the M77. So this bit here's probably all been saved.
Oh aye, this whole...
Because of...
What was meant to happen, that's the off-ramp there. That off-ramp there should have come right through here. This is where the camp was, this whole area. This whole area was all the camp. There was makeshift tents, there was loads of tree houses up in the trees. It was a real vibrant camp, you know. Colin McLeod, the boy that was there, that spent most of the time there, on his lonesome a lot of the times, was a local guy.
Rather than slagging off the system, we're trying to do something positive. And we've got a few months to really make a difference, you know what I'm saying? We've got an interest in it. It is communal land, it belongs to the people, so we should defend it if we value it. So that's why we're here.
The camp started to grow, there was more interest in it because it was coming near the period where, you know, there was going to be a battle on it, basically.
Over the fence, please could you move over the other side of the fence? Thank you.
This is the countryside, which lot are we breaking?
This whole place was surrounded with police. They blocked off the road back there at the roundabout, blocked the road off up there. There was a full line of them all the way right round. Hundreds of them, police officers. In front of them was all the security guards, all yellow high-vis vests, yellow jackets. And over at Corker Hill, there was a caravan set up, and some of our kind of activist community council members were inside that caravan on the night. The morning of Valentine's Day, they stayed overnight. They were playing Risk. It was a game. They were playing Risk. I always picture the pieces from the Risk board all scattered all over the forest floor where the caravan had been situated, because what happened was the security showed up and turned the caravan aside. For us it was just a snapshot of a couple of days of having that big presence of the state in there to force through the diktats of these people who were making millions, Wimpy and all the rest of them, who were going to make, you know, fireworks and profits out of the construction of this monstrosity here.
The culture that flourished in the Pollock Free State still has a home today in the Gale workshop in Govan.
Gale grew out of the M77 Pollock Free State motorway protest in the 1990s, where some of the people who were involved in the programme here were being cut off from Pollock Park in the communities they were living in, and got out into tents and up tree houses and so on, protesting. And when that motorway got pushed through, one of them, the guy called Colin McLeod, said, "We've shown what we're against, now let's show them what we're for." And a lot of the skills of sharing food together, of carving things, of working together, that began there were carried forward into this place.
Both of us are working on a crossbow at the moment. So basically it's just really simple to make. I mean, we got 4 bits of wood from the shed at the back there. Basically we're just using this little bit of string here, and then we're just connecting all the bits up. So it's really, really simple. It just gives me something to be proud of. You know, when you make something, you feel like you've achieved something, and you want to come back next week and you want to work on something else again, and you know that you're almost improving your skill, you're making yourself a trade almost as well. I've been unemployed for a wee while now. I've been unemployed for just over a month's time, and I've never really been out of work. It was a different experience for me, do you know what I mean? Just kind of waking up and not really having a real purpose. But since I've been coming here, it's just kind of given me something to work on, and it's been giving me a way to sort of channel my energy that I would have had.
Carpentry isn't a uniquely human skill. Other animals can be just as creative. One of the things we were talking about was monocultures, and how you can possibly start to undo some of the damage that we've done by reintroducing species back into nature.
Yeah, things that we've lost.
Yeah. And some of that stuff's happening around about here.
This pool's created by a family of beavers that we have here. They've dammed it as you'd expect beavers to do, but what that means is that they create diversity in the landscape. You know, most of the times I come past this area, I'll see something new that they've been up to, so they're pretty industrious. And they gnaw this and then wait for high winds or a storm, and that'll blow it over, and then they can get access to the canopy. Beavers are called ecosystem engineers because they basically transform the landscape. They create this wet area. There was a burn running through here, but by damming it, they make it a wetland, and by felling the trees, they open up the landscape. By removing species like beavers and wolves, we've disrupted natural mechanisms.
In our workshop here, you will see things like the lynx and the bear and the wolf, various animals that have become extinct in Scotland. We feel that there's something important about their spirit, if I can put it that way, that's still with us. And that when we wake up to those animal spirits, when we wake up to the qualities that those animals represent, and hopefully start to see some of them at least being reintroduced into Scotland, we think it wakes up something in our peoplehood as well.
the boer disturb the ground, and they got them in order to try and encourage ground disturbance for tree regeneration. So that creates bare patches where tree seeds can get in. Well, there's two problems for tree regeneration. The seeds can't get in to the earth, and also when they do, there's too many deer to eat them. So we need the boar to be disturbing the ground. We also need the wolves. If we had wolves, they not only reduce the numbers through eating them, but they also create what's called a landscape of fear. And that means they're moving the deer about. So the deer can't stay in one place, and that allows the woodlands to regenerate.
Nowhere in Scotland is wild or natural, arguably. It's all been heavily influenced by human activity.
It may look as though I'm in a forest where you'd find lots of wild animals like wolves and bears, or creatures like goblins and hobbits. But in actual fact, this is a man-made environment, just as man-made as a skateboard park or a shopping centre. Ecologically, it's pretty dead. If you look at the floor of the forest here, there's no ferns, there's no flowers, there's no foliage, because what this basically is a timber production factory.
Farming has become increasingly industrialised, and what's happened is the little parts of farming that have allowed wildlife to exist, so the hedgerows and even the techniques that have been good for certain species have been taken away in this industrialisation process. So now a lot of arable farmland is like a wildlife no-go zone.
Even the areas of Scotland that epitomise our notion of wilderness are nothing more than an illusion. The bleak beauty of our hills may look pretty on a postcard, but they are devoid of the natural variations that sustain a healthy ecosystem, a result of the creative destruction unleashed in the 18th century.
People were cleared from the highlands in order to have a lot of sheep to grow wool for the Napoleonic War. That has had catastrophic ecological impacts, and it also encouraged monopoly because people make money from the land, so it's more attractive to own more land.
We can't see this country as, a bit crap and specifically an unproductive, barren, northern, cold place to be, because it's not. The idea that the empty glens are some sort of natural state is not just historically inaccurate, but sort of deeply offensive to the people who used to belong to that land before they were removed from it. So we need to really address how we see these places and how they can be used for food production, how people can live there again. They have been destroyed over time, and their natural cycles and ecology have been removed. Part of the repeopling has to have a fundamental understanding of that as well in that process.
The alienation of many working class people from the natural environment of Scotland is not through their choice, but through their poverty.
One of the interesting processes in the last 150 years has been how private wealth has accumulated at the expense of public wealth. We've seen this process particularly unfolding in Britain in the last 30 years, where people have got extraordinarily wealthy. There's the privatisation of national resources such as oil, electricity, water, at the expense of public ownership and public utilities.
I mean, I'm certainly of the generation that remembers when gas and electricity belonged to the people. We're not talking a long time ago, 60s, 70s and 80s, even up to the late 1980s. People could afford their electricity bill, they could afford their gas bill. It didn't seem to be a big issue. But certainly within a couple of years of privatisation, the fuel bills rocketed. I remember thousands of workers losing their jobs. I remember their conditions of employment deteriorating. And I remember loads getting paid off in different contracts and stuff. The big six obviously seen their profits soar, and they seen like our bills just rocket. And hence we've seen fuel poverty.
The levels of fuel poverty in the Western Isles and in the Northern Isles are in some places like 60-70% or higher. It is absolutely shocking. And when you can see an oil flare from your house and you can't afford to pay for the oil-fired central heating and you live in a very, very old house and it's damp, that becomes normalised, but it should never be normalised.
Just as the Industrial Revolution was powered by the exploitation of coal and oil and gas, and the public ownership of these things became turned over to private ownership so people could make money out of it, the same process is now taking place with the wind and the sun as scientists discover new ways of exploiting the forces of nature.
I definitely see renewable energy as a package, so you can't look at this specifically as wind energy being the future, or solar energy being the future, or biogas being the future, or hydro being the future. You definitely have to see renewable energy as a collection of different types of energy generation technologies that work very well together. So wind is fantastic because it allows a reasonable level of power generation per land mass. You can farm very, very close to wind turbines. You can have livestock very close to wind turbines. It doesn't affect them. The farm that I used to work on was built on farming land. We'd often come down after a hot day and working in the wind turbine, walk down the ladder, and we'd come out of the door and there'd be a ring of cows taking shelter from the sun around the wind turbine. So it was a nice feeling to be able to walk out of something that generates electricity for 1,000 households and doesn't really cause a huge impact to the landscape that it's in. I'd like to see a coal-fired power plant where you can walk out the front door and have a cow come and say hello.
The burning of fossil fuels to power our cars, televisions and mobile phones has polluted our air, damaged the oceans and caused wars across the world. Renewable sources tap into natural rhythms and create the opportunity to rethink the whole way in which energy ownership is structured.
I think any kind of concentrated resource, be it energy or a natural resource, creates potential for conflict. And if we have the capacity to reduce that concentration and spread energy, then it reduces the potential for conflict occurring.
Under the structure we have, the only viable developments often, because of the land ownership issue, is a huge, large-scale thing that has to be extremely profitable for one corporation, and it is, nonsensical.
So there is a question about, although nobody owns the wind and nobody owns the sun, if you don't own the land, then you can't take advantage of these power sources, really, can you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's bizarre that we should own the wind.
Or the sun.
Really, or the sun. Or the earth. Scotland actually has the most concentrated pattern of land ownership anywhere in the developed world. About 1,000 people own 60% of the land in Scotland. Historical effects of this monopoly of land ownership have been catastrophic, really, and has created a monoculture over much of upland Scotland. And what wind farms, I think, is a continuation of this idea, do is they provide an income stream like sheep farming did. You know, a landowner gets a rent from the power companies, and per large wind turbine, they'll be getting, like 12 grand per year. It's big amounts of money, and it's, another of these direct transfers of wealth from the poor to the rich. The folk that are suffering from fuel poverty are having to pay a subsidy within their energy bill in order to fund big landowners having industrial scale wind farms on their land.
What I would like to see is companies involving the community in the very early stages, not being secretive about their plans to build wind farms, and talking to them and finding out how they would see this benefiting their community, and also involving them in the planning stages. If you have to scrap 2 or 3 turbines, but you have community involvement and community acceptance of the wind farm, why not do that?
This can't be a top-down process from either government or private companies. This is a community process. It has to be a very democratic and accountable one of shared decision-making of the decisions that are right for each individual area and the people who want to or do live there. you know, the well-known examples of Egg and Gia, and places where they've, you know, put in their own small hydro schemes, using solar power, using wind turbines. These schemes work really, really well.
What happened to an Egg is that, like much of Scotland, for a long time it had been privately owned and used as a place by the wealthy landowner. Things were getting pretty bad in terms of depopulation and the place getting run down. I was approached and asked if I would be involved in setting up a trust that would challenge private ownership. The said trust progressively became democratised as local people took it on. In the end, we raised £1.6 million and were able to buy the island at a knockdown price because, of course, when the natives are restless, the private buyers don't get so interested. And so the community was able to buy Egg and now are achieving incredible things in terms of community energy, housing, increasing population and so on. Incredible what they're achieving that shows what can be done when people take control of their own place.
Whether it's a Hebridean island or a Glasgow housing estate, it's the people that live in these communities that are best equipped to come up with solutions to their problems.
Everything's closed down in this area now. You're actually standing on the site of what was Pollock's biggest primary school. We had a fight over this as well. You know, it was there was massive school closures going on at that time. We fought this one, we fought Bonnyholm at the same time, and then St Edmunds kicked in later on. Even when Thatcher was in power, we had so much more inside this community, so much more. But down there, through the other side of the woods there, it was just a canyon of tenements. Dormanside Road, and as I said, it was one of the craziest streets in Glasgow, you know.
Is that where you used to live, Dormanside Road?
There were always trails that ran through it, natural trails, or man-made trails that were created as shortcuts. You would just take the cut from there and just go as the crow flies. So you had a path that was created, it looked like a natural path anyway, that just ran all the way right down there and right down to the post office, and people would use that. So it was, even though it was a big set of woods and it could be eerie at times, people would use it continuously, and you would meet people here and chat with people, meet other people, and they were just on their way back and forward. This is just generations of young people all been through this. You can see with all the mentions. In 1989, there was Nazis trying to get organised in the area and trying to recruit young'uns, and we'd nowhere to meet, so we decided to have a meeting in the water tower, and we'd done it word of mouth with all the young squad in the scheme. And some of the young ones that were involved in the poll tax campaign came up and swept this place out for the first time in its life, and we used this area here to explain to all the young squad about what the BNP really were all about, what fascism was all about, how did Hitler come to power, where does this kind of stuff come from, and why these kind of people try to recruit them and get them involved in Nazi politics and racist politics. Through that rally, we then went on to become involved and actually, you could say, take over. And it was the youngins that done it, took the local community hall, and for there, just used that as the base to organise a whole host of different events. We had raves in here at 3 and 4 in the morning. The Polish just left us alone to our own devices. There was never any trouble, there was never any issues. And the money that we raised out it went into our kids' playgroups and all that kind of stuff, into the youth clubs, buying strings for the music workshops and all that kind of stuff. But the idea of having this in the middle of your community, Liam, take the river into the equation, and the woods, for instance, just take two things into the equation if they were utilised.
The physicality and the geography of the setting. It's just
so
so much
local
potential.
Environment here is second to none. It's second to none. And it still could be utilised, and hopefully it will be in the future for many different things. Bastard. Like, fucking raging, man. Fucking raging. I need to get a fucking bit of paint put at it as well, man.
It's always inspiring when you speak to people like Jaws, because you come away feeling as though you're actually part of something bigger.
This is teasing. Showed that earlier. So this wool is washed after the sheep has been sheared. And sometimes there's some plant bits in it. And then it goes in here. Drum carder.
This is all cotton we're doing as well for rugs for the floor. But this is going to be something different from what we normally do. So
it's recycling bed sheets or curtains, clothes. Yeah.
By getting rid of the landowner, the community becomes the owners unto themselves. What that does is it gives people direct control of their own resources, a direct sense of responsibility for their place, and that allows human beings to flourish in ways that they can't do when they're otherwise being kept down by pressure from above.
For generations, we have been systematically separated from the land, which has led us to become alienated from nature and perhaps blind to the consequences our way of organising society has on the environment and ourselves. With land reform now firmly on the agenda in Scotland, there is a real chance we can get to the root of the problem. This presents exciting opportunities for reimagining the way we do things. Together with our friends the beaver and the wolf, we can take our land back from the pirates, thieves and tax exiles who pose as our moral superiors, and use our resources for the benefit of everybody rather than the profit of a privileged few.